Hi, and welcome to Paranormal Spirits, where we can share a drink. I'll tell you a spooky story, and we'll tear it apart a little bit, because we can. So, tonight, we're going to talk about the scary story of the seventh barn. Now, like all extremely scary stories, this story takes place in Ohio. What is up with Ohio? All kinds of crazy shit happens there. So let me set the story for you. It takes place around the year 1890 in the town of Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. Now, in this town lived a wealthy farmer and his large family. He had already had 6 kids. They were popping them out one after another. And after each kid was born, he built a barn and named that barn after the baby. Because who doesn't need 6 barns? Even if you are a wealthy farmer. I find that a little extravagant and unnecessary. What are you going to be putting in all of these barns, Mr. Farmer? Anyway, so his wife was pregnant with baby number 7. She's pregnant with baby number 7. Now, of course, like all the other kids, he was building a barn for baby number 7. Unfortunately, his wife died during childbirth, as did the baby. Now, the farmer went insane with grief. He loved his wife, and he just could not handle her death. Even though he had 6 kids on his own, he was just absolutely insane with grief over the death of his wife and 7th child. Over the next year, because of the farmer's depression, the family sank deep into poverty. Their cattle became ill. The family was starving. So, Mr. Farmer Man, I get that you're sad that your wife died, but you still have 6 kids to support. Maybe we should think about that. Let's think about it while we drink. I hope you poured yourself one too, just to join me. So while he was in the midst of this depression, after his wife's and 7th child's death, the farmer snapped. And in the middle of the night, in the midst of his madness and despair, the farmer took each child one by one, led them out to their barn, because as we remember, they each had their own barn, where he took an axe and killed the child and buried them in the barn. Then, when it came to the 7th barn, the farmer now hung himself. Eventually, as the story goes, all the barns were torn down and the land was sold off. Did they remove the children? It doesn't say. I'm gonna hope that they did. Ugh. Anyway, nobody wanted to buy the 7th barn where the farmer hung himself. Okay, here's a question. You're okay with buying a barn where a child was brutally slaughtered, but where he hung himself, it's too much for you to handle? The 7th barn was abandoned and became forgotten over time. But that's not the end of our story. In 1997, a local Ohio teacher claimed that he found that infamous 7th barn's actual location, which by this point, we're talking almost 100 years later, it had been forgotten about. Frankly, nobody really knew for sure where the 7th barn was located. So this teacher claimed he knew where the barn was. He says, after doing some research, none of the barns had actually been torn down. They'd simply been relocated into neighboring farms. Okay. He claimed he knew this because the nameplates on each door were the names of the children that had been murdered. Now, he found out where the 7th barn was. So he and his teenage son decided they were going to go and have a paranormal investigation at the 7th barn to see if there was any activity. They went out and went to the 7th barn. Now, the following morning, the teacher's wife realized, my husband and son have never returned home. And so she called the police and says, oh my God, my husband and son haven't returned home. I don't know what's happening. So the police then started to look for them. Don't you have to be missing for 24 hours before the police start looking for you? Not that there are holes in this story. So the police start looking, and they find the abandoned car on the side of the road. So they search the area. And while they're searching, They find a barn nearby. They enter the barn, and what do they find but the teacher and his son hanging from the rafters, just like the farmer. Okay, I'm thinking that if there was some creepy ass barn where a farmer had hung himself after murdering 6 children, and a teacher and his son now found this barn and ended up in the same predicament, i.e., dead and swinging from the rafters, that it might have been on the news. Nothing. What do you think? So, I will leave you with that. I hope you enjoyed the story of the 7th barn. Have a drink, have a great night, and I will see you next time.